What if I told you the laughter, the jukebox, and that cool guy in the leather jacket who could fix cars with one punch were all a lie? Behind the smiles of Happy Days were staged tricks, fake props, and contracts that forced everyone to keep quiet. This wasn't just a sitcom. It was a carefully crafted illusion. And once you hear these 13 hidden facts, you'll never look at Happy Days the same way again. Fact 1. Ron Howard's escape from the Vietnam War. Everyone remembers Ron Howard as the perfect all-American boy. Polite, clean-cut, a face so innocent it could sell apple pie. But what no one knew was that Happy Days literally saved him from the Vietnam War. In 1972, he was just 18 and ready to quit acting for good. He'd been accepted to USC Film School and dreamed of becoming a director. Then came the draft notice, that small, cruel envelope that could send a kid halfway across the world. But there was one loophole. If your job employed 30 or more people, you could apply for a work deferment. Of course, a network sitcom qualified perfectly. So when Gary Marshall offered him the role of Richie Cunningham, Ron wasn't thinking about fame. He was thinking about survival. He took the job, shot the pilot, and waited. The deferment came through. Just like that, Happy Days became his shield against the war. When people later called him America's Golden Boy, they had no idea that behind that warm smile was the quiet relief of someone who had just dodged a bullet. Literally. Fact 2. The dark secret behind Fonzie's motorcycle. Fonzie was the king of cool, the guy who made leather jackets and motorcycles the dream of every teenage boy. But here's the twist. Henry Winkler was terrified of motorcycles. During one of the first scenes that required him to ride 5 feet forward, Winkler froze. His hands shook so badly that when he twisted the handle, the bike shot forward like a bullet, nearly crushing the show's cinematographer. The crew screamed. The director dove out of the way. And Winkler? He just sat there, white as a ghost, mumbling, "I don't do bikes." From that day on, the Fonz never truly rode again. Every riding scene you saw was movie magic. The motorcycle was either being pulled by a truck, or Winkler was sitting on a stationary bike with a moving backdrop. Behind the scenes, the crew joked that Fonzie could tame women, bullies, and jukeboxes, but not a Harley. Yet the secret was deadly serious. The studio feared that if the truth leaked, it would destroy the myth of America's coolest rebel. So they hid it. For years. Fact 3. The leather jacket that terrified network censors. It's hard to believe, but in the early 70s, ABC thought Fonzie's leather jacket was dangerous. Yes, a piece of clothing nearly caused a television war. When Happy Days began, the network refused to let Henry Winkler wear it. Executives were convinced the jacket made Fonzie look like a juvenile delinquent, a symbol of gangs, switchblades, and rebellion. They wanted America's new heartthrob to look clean, not like trouble. So in the first few episodes, Fonzie wore a beige windbreaker. But it didn't work. The cool factor evaporated. Winkler looked less like the king of Milwaukee and more like a substitute teacher. That's when Gary Marshall struck a deal with the censors. Fonzie could wear his leather jacket only if he was near his motorcycle. That way, it was practical gear, not rebellion. It led to hilarious set solutions. Fonzie's bike suddenly appeared everywhere. Outside Arnold's, next to lockers, even parked suspiciously close to the Cunningham's kitchen door. Eventually, the jacket won. Fonzie's popularity exploded, fans copied his style, and ABC surrendered. Fact 4. The alien that almost destroyed the show. You think Happy Days was just about jukeboxes and high school crushes? Think again. There was a time when it turned into science fiction, literally. It all started with Gary Marshall's little boy, a Star Wars fanatic, who begged his dad, "Put aliens on Happy Days." It sounded like a joke. But Gary, always the dad who listened, decided to give it a shot. That one innocent request gave birth to the most bizarre chapter in TV history. Mork from Ork. Producers laughed at first. It was so surreal to put aliens in a 1950s sitcom. But Gary was serious. He sent his team to find the weirdest, most unpredictable comedian they could. After several stars said no, his sister Ronnie Marshall stepped in and said, "There's this street performer in L.A., talks to himself, makes noises, and people throw money at him." That performer was Robin Williams. During his audition, Robin ignored the chair they gave him and sat on his head instead. Everyone froze, but Gary Marshall whispered, "Hire him." Immediately, the Alien episode aired, and audiences went crazy. It was so popular that it launched Mork and Mindy, turning Robin Williams into a household name. But not everyone on Happy Days was happy. Writers felt the show had jumped reality. Actors grumbled that the warmth of Milwaukee was turning into a circus. Behind closed doors, Ron Howard reportedly said, "If this show becomes about aliens, I'm out." And he meant it. Although Mork from Ork saved Robin Williams' career, it nearly shattered Happy Days' soul. Fact 5. The day Happy Days jumped the shark. In Happy Days, Fonzie literally jumped over a shark on water skis. That moments were so bizarre they become legends in pop culture. Season 5, California. A tan, leather-jacketed Henry Winkler balancing on skis in the Pacific Ocean, cameras rolling. And Winkler asking, "We're really doing this?" Oh, they did. In the episode Hollywood Part 3, Fonzie water skis over a live shark. Because, well, no one really knows why. It was supposed to be fun, but when audiences saw it, they didn't laugh. They stared. Years later, a college kid named John Hine coined the phrase "jumping the shark," meaning the exact moment when a show runs out of ideas and resorts to nonsense to survive. And Happy Days became the perfect example. Henry Winkler had grown up water skiing competitively. When writers learned about it, they built a whole episode around his real-life skill. Winkler even did most of the stunts himself, in a custom leather jacket with the lining ripped out so he wouldn't sink. He nailed the scene. The shark, the jump, the applause. And while critics later mocked it, Winkler still calls it one of his proudest moments. Fact 6. The brother who vanished without a goodbye. One day, Richie Cunningham had an older brother named Chuck. Tall, athletic, always bouncing a basketball down the hall. He was the classic 1950s college kid. And then he was gone. No farewell scene, no reason, just erased. Chuck appeared in the first 2 seasons of Happy Days. He'd walk in, crack a joke, shoot a few hoops, and vanish into the background. The actor, Gavin O'Herlihy, quickly realized the role was going nowhere. "I didn't want to play a guy who grunted and bounced a ball once a week," he later said. He left. Producers replaced him with Randolph Roberts, but it didn't help. Fans barely noticed, and the writers quietly pulled the plug. Then came the strange part. The next season, the Cunningham family suddenly had only 2 kids. Mrs. C never mentioned her eldest again. Richie never said his brother's name. It was like Chuck had never existed. Hollywood insiders later revealed why. Fonzie had taken over the show. The network didn't need another background son when they had a cultural icon in a leather jacket. So they didn't kill Chuck off. They just deleted him from reality. The move was so bizarre it created its own pop culture phrase, Chuck Cunningham syndrome. It's now used to describe any character who disappears from a series without explanation, as if swallowed by the TV itself. Fact 7. The genius behind Fonzie's perfect hair. It looked effortless. That slick, shiny, gravity-defying hair that made Fonzie the king of cool. But here's the twist. He never actually combed it. Not once. It started as a joke. In one scene, Fonzie was supposed to pull out his comb, fix his hair, and walk away. But Henry Winkler, in a split-second decision, flipped open the comb, looked in the mirror, smirked, and said, "Hey, perfect," before putting it back without touching a strand. Surprisingly, it was pure gold. Fonzie didn't need to comb his hair. His coolness was untouchable. Behind the scenes, though, that effortless style took hours. Stylists mixed hair glue with pomade to keep every strand locked in place. Winkler joked, "It took an army to make me look like I didn't care." The bit was genius because it flipped every bad boy cliché upside down. Other greasers were always fussing with their look. Fonzie didn't need to. He was the look. Fact 8. The rivalry that shattered the Happy Days illusion. The biggest tension on Happy Days didn't happen on screen. It happened between its two stars. Ron Howard and Henry Winkler, America's favorite duo, were quietly being torn apart by fame. When the show began, it was Ron's story, the sweet red-headed kid from Milwaukee discovering life, love, and friendship. But by season 3, that balance was gone. Fonzie fever had taken over. The leather jacket, the finger snap, the eye. Henry Winkler had become a cultural explosion. Every cover, every fan letter, every network promo screamed Fonzie. The studio even considered renaming the series Fonzie's Happy Days. That was the breaking point. Ron Howard found out from a press release, not from his boss. He marched into creator Gary Marshall's office and said flatly, "If this show becomes that, I'm gone." Gary backed down, but the damage was done. Their friendship never recovered. For years, they filmed side by side, pretending to be brothers while barely speaking between takes. Winkler later admitted, "I never meant to steal the spotlight. It just happened. And I hated that it took 2 decades and 1 wedding for them to finally make peace." Winkler showed up, hugged Ron, and whispered, "I love you, man." Ron smiled and said, "You always did." I just forgot, fact 9. Monkey. Almost became Fonzie. It sounds insane, but it's true. The Fonz almost wasn't Henry Winkler. The role that defined cool nearly went to Mickey Dolenz, the drummer from the Monkees. Dolenz had everything producers wanted: charisma, timing, and a built-in fan base. During his audition, he nailed the swagger, the smirk, even the catchphrases. But then came the problem. He was 6 feet tall. Standing next to Ron Howard, who was just 5 feet 9 inches, it threw off every shot. Fonzie was supposed to be the tough guy next door, not a giant towering over Richie Cunningham. Gary Marshall and the ABC execs loved Dolenz, but television is about image, and the visual just didn't work. Enter Henry Winkler, a 5'6" unknown from New York with sharp instincts and quiet confidence. The moment he walked in and said, "I," the room froze. He was so Fonzie. That tiny height difference changed TV history. Had Dolenz been an inch shorter, he might have owned the role, and the world would have lost Henry Winkler's legendary Fonz forever. Fact 10. The money war that no one saw coming. If you think Happy Days ended peacefully, think again. The final blow didn't come from ratings. It came from lawsuits. In 2011, decades after the show ended, several cast members, including Anson Williams, Marion Ross, Don Most, and Aaron Moran, sued CBS for millions. And you know the reason: unpaid royalties. They'd discovered that their faces and voices were being used on merchandise, lunchboxes, T-shirts, slot machines, without a cent of profit shared. CBS had been quietly cashing in for years. When they confronted the studio, lawyers brushed them off, calling the contracts ancient history. But these weren't kids anymore. They'd given a decade of their lives to a show that made millions off their smiles. The case got ugly. CBS accused them of exaggerating. The actors accused CBS of exploitation. The media called it the Happy Days War. It wasn't about greed, it was about dignity. Marion Ross, in her 80s at the time, said, "We weren't asking for the world, just what was promised." In the end, the court ruled in their favor. The payout wasn't massive, about $60,000 each, but it was justice. And for once, the underdogs won. But the damage lingered. The show that had defined happiness ended with bitterness and lawsuits. Fact 11. The brutal advice that changed Potsy's life forever. Gary Marshall didn't sugarcoat things. One day on set, he looked straight at Anson Williams, the lovable, goofy Potsy, and said, "Most of you won't be actors all your lives. Especially you, Anson." It sounded like an insult, but it wasn't. Marshall wasn't trying to crush him. He was warning him. He told Anson to use the Paramount lot like a school, learn the cameras, the lighting, the scripts, the business. "Acting ends," he said. "Knowledge doesn't." Anson listened. When Happy Days wrapped, he didn't chase fading fame or nostalgia tours. He went behind the camera and built a whole new career. He directed episodes of Beverly Hills, 90210, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and Seventh Heaven. Gary's blunt honesty turned out to be prophecy. Potsy didn't fade away. He evolved. And in Hollywood, that's rarer than fame itself. Fact 12. The love story of Fonzie and Pinky. It was supposed to be television magic. Fonzie finally falling in love. Season 4's Fonzie Loves Pinky was hyped like a royal wedding. Pinky Tuscadero, played by Roz Kelly, was tough, glamorous, and wild. She rode motorcycles, wore pink leather, and matched Fonzie's energy beat for beat. But behind the cameras, it was chaos. Roz Kelly was fiery, blunt, and nothing like the wholesome cast she joined. She clashed instantly with Henry Winkler, Yale-educated, methodical, calm. Kelly later admitted, "I grew up on welfare, so I don't relate to rich kids." The tension was electric. On-set fights broke out, tempers snapped, and the chemistry that looked sizzling on screen was pure hostility in real life. Producers tried to smooth it over. They rewrote scenes, added romantic moments, even considered giving Pinky her own spin-off. But by mid-season, everyone had had enough. Kelly's attitude was called too abrasive, and she was quietly fired. For years, Winkler avoided talking about it, only admitting later that it was a painful time. So the great love story that was supposed to make fans swoon ended up becoming one of TV's biggest behind-the-scenes heartbreaks. Fact 13. The spin-off curse that humiliated its stars. Everyone wanted a piece of Happy Days. The ratings were huge, the characters iconic, and the network wanted more. But what came next was pure chaos. A string of spin-offs so cursed they nearly wrecked careers. Pat Morita, who played Arnold, the lovable diner owner. He was so popular that producers gave him his own show, Mr. T and Tina. It bombed so fast, it became a punchline. 5 episodes, gone. Then came Blansky's Beauties, another spin-off that tried to cash in on the Happy Days glow. Also a disaster. The reviews were brutal. Critics called it a Frankenstein made of old jokes. Pat Morita returned to Happy Days quietly. Years later, he'd get his revenge. Not in Milwaukee, but in a karate dojo. The Karate Kid made him a legend, an Oscar nominee, and the heart of an entire generation. But the curse didn't stop with him. Producers kept trying. Joni Loves Chachi, Out of the Blue, Laverne and Shirley. Some flopped, some fizzled, but all proved one thing. You can't bottle lightning twice. The laughter, the magic, the innocence, they only lived inside Happy Days. So, what do you think? Were those Happy Days really that happy? Tell us your favorite shocking fact in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.